The train screeched into the small suburban station just after sunset, the air thick with the scent of rain, soaked asphalt and blooming jasmine. Maya stepped off with a grin tugging at her lips, the handle of her worn suitcase creaking under her grip. She had planned this surprise for weeks, a weekend home from college to celebrate her mother's birthday. Her heart was full, picturing her mom's teary smile, her father's proud hug, and the familiar warmth of home, cooked food filling the kitchen. The taxi ride from the station felt longer than usual. Every streetlight she passed flickered like a heartbeat of nostalgia. Her school, the corner store, the old oak tree she once climbed with her brother Derek. Everything looked the same, yet something about the silence unsettled her. When the cab finally pulled up to her house, her breath caught. The windows were dark, the curtains gone, and on the porch, stacked in uneven heaps, were black garbage bags. At first, she thought it was trash waiting for pickup. But then she saw a corner of a familiar blue blanket poking out, the one she'd had since childhood, the one her mother had refused to throw away no matter how tattered it became. Her heart pounded. She climbed the steps slowly, each creak echoing in the still air. Her suitcase slipped from her hand as she tore open one of the bags. Her clothes, folded haphazardly, mixed with books, framed photos, and random trinkets. A picture frame fell out, her high school graduation photo. The glass cracked. What is this?" she whispered. Her key trembled in her hand as she tried the door. It didn't fit. She jiggled it again, harder this time, but the lock had been changed. Her knock echoed through the hollow space inside. No answer. The house, her home, stood silent as if it had never known her. She pulled out her phone and dialed her mother. Straight to voicemail, her father's voicemail. Derek, nothing. A numb panic crept up her spine. She called again and again until her hands began to shake. Maya, a soft voice came from across the street. Mrs. Henderson, their elderly neighbor, stood in her doorway wrapped in a shawl. "Where's my family?" Maya asked, her voice cracking. "Why are my things out here?" The woman hesitated, looking down. "Honey, they moved out a few weeks ago, packed everything and left. I thought you knew." Maya froze. "Moved out? What do you mean, moved out? Where did they go?" I don't know. They didn't say much, just that they were leaving for a fresh start." Her knees felt weak. The world blurred. She looked at the bags, the darkened windows, the door that once swung open to laughter and safety. Everything she'd known, every memory she cherished, had been reduced to trash on a porch. By the time night fell, the street was empty again. Maya sat on the steps beside her belongings, hugging her knees against the cold. The porch light flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the yard. She felt small, abandoned in a world that had turned its back on her without explanation. In her heart, something cracked, a soundless shatter of trust that would never be mended. Her home was gone. Her family was gone. And for the first time in her life, Maya was truly alone. The next morning, Maya woke up on Ellie's couch with a dull ache in her chest and a ringing headache from crying too much. Ellie, her childhood best friend, had found her huddled on the porch at midnight, soaked by the rain, surrounded by garbage bags full of her life. Without asking questions, he'd driven her to his apartment and wrapped her in a blanket that smelled faintly of coffee and comfort. Now, in the harsh morning light, the nightmare refused to fade. Her phone still showed no missed calls, no texts, no explanations. Just silence. Illy placed a mug of coffee in front of her. "You need to eat something," he said gently. "I need to know why," she whispered, staring into the dark swirl of her drink. "Why would they just leave me?" He sat beside her, hesitant. Maybe something happened. No. Her voice cracked, sharper than she intended. "You don't just move out and throw your daughter's life in trash bags unless you want to erase her." Her words hung between them, heavy and bitter. By noon, Maya was back on her laptop, trying to make sense of the chaos. She checked her bank account. the one her parents had helped her open for college expenses. The screen blinked back an empty balance. The savings she'd carefully set aside were gone. Her stomach dropped. She called the bank. The woman on the other end was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, Miss Walker, but the joint account holder authorized several transfers over the past 2 months. Joint account holder, yes, your father." The line went quiet for a long moment before Maya managed a hoarse, "Thank you." When she hung up, her hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped her phone. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It was printed in numbers, statements, and digital receipts. That evening, she went back to her old neighborhood, hoping maybe Mrs. Henderson knew more. The old woman's eyes softened when she saw her. "I'm so sorry, dear. I didn't want to tell you this, but I overheard your parents talking before they left. Something about Derek's business and money problems." Maya felt her stomach twist. "Derek, what about him?" "They said they were helping him out. He's family, after all. But they also said they didn't have room to keep paying for college anymore." Her mind reeled. Derek, her older brother, the one who'd always been reckless, impulsive, charming his way through every mistake. She'd defended him her whole life, begged their parents to forgive him when he got into trouble. And now, it seemed, he'd convinced them to cut her off entirely. When she returned to Illy's apartment that night, the shock had hardened into a cold, sharp ache. "They chose him over me," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "They didn't even tell me, they just erased me." Illy reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I worked so hard. I did everything they wanted. I never asked for anything, Illy. And they took it all, my savings, my home, my family." The silence stretched. Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft and relentless. But beneath the sorrow, something else stirred, faint but alive. A spark. If they thought they could discard her like the garbage bags on that porch, they didn't know who she truly was. Maya wiped her tears, her eyes glinting through the haze. They wanted to start over. She whispered, "Fine, so will I." The first few months were the hardest. Every morning, Maya woke to the same hollow ache, the kind that didn't fade with sleep or time. The betrayal had burned through her like acid, leaving behind a quiet emptiness. But she refused to let it define her. She picked up a job at a small cafe near campus, serving coffee to hurried commuters and bleary-eyed students. The pay was meager, the hours long, but it was something she earned on her own, no help, no family name. She learned to survive on instant noodles, second-hand clothes, and sheer determination. At night, after her shifts, she sat by the window of her tiny rented room with her laptop glowing in the dark. She taught herself everything she could: finance, marketing, coding, and design. Each skill she gained was a brick in the wall she was building between her old life and the new one she was creating. Illy stayed by her side, offering quiet encouragement, though he knew she didn't want pity. "You're stronger than them," he told her once when she broke down after receiving a message from her college's billing office. A reminder of tuition she could no longer afford. "I don't feel strong," she'd said, voice trembling. "Strength isn't about feeling it," he replied softly. "It's about doing it anyway." Those words stuck with her. 2 years later, Maya graduated with honors. She'd worked 3 jobs, skipped parties, and lived on less sleep than she thought possible. When her name was called at the ceremony, she looked out at the empty seats where her parents should have been. For a heartbeat, the pain returned, sharp and familiar. But then she smiled. They hadn't taken everything. They'd only freed her to become more. After graduation, she launched a small online business, combining her love for art and digital design. She sold handmade journals and personalized stationery, small things, but each one made with care. To her surprise, people loved them. Orders grew. Within a year, her business became profitable enough for her to move into a cozy apartment with sunlight streaming through tall windows. She'd done it not for revenge, not for validation, but for survival. Yet destiny wasn't done turning its wheel. One evening, while checking orders, an unfamiliar name appeared in her inbox. Derek Walker. Her breath caught. "Hey Maya, it's been a while. I heard about your business. Looks like you're doing great. Mom and Dad are not doing so well. Derek's investments went under and they lost the house. They're staying in a small rental now. I know they'd love to hear from you." Maya read the message twice, then a third time. Her pulse was calm. For years she had dreamed of this, them losing what they had traded her for. Yet now that it had come, there was no satisfaction, no gloating thrill. Only quiet understanding. She wrote back 2 sentences. "I'm glad you reached out. Tell them I'm doing fine, really fine." Days later, she received another message, this time from her mother. Apologies filled the screen, dripping with regret and pleas for forgiveness. Maya stared at it for a long while, her hands steady. She didn't delete it, but she didn't reply either, not yet. Forgiveness would come on her terms, not theirs. For now she had work to do, her future still unfolding, her strength still rising. 3 years later, autumn arrived early in her hometown. The air smelled of wood smoke and fallen leaves, and the maple trees burned in shades of gold and amber. Maya drove down the familiar road, her car humming softly beneath the endless sky. It had been almost 6 years since she'd stood on that street. 6 years since she found her life stuffed into garbage bags on a porch that no longer welcomed her. Now she was coming back, not as the girl who left, but as the woman who survived. Her business had grown beyond what she ever dreamed. What began as handmade journals had become a full-fledged design company, supplying boutiques and artists across the country. She'd hired a small team, rented an office downtown, and even started mentoring other students who had no family to fall back on. Her story, once defined by loss, had become a quiet symbol of resilience. And yet, when the real estate agent called about a certain property going up for sale, her breath had caught in her throat. The house, her house, the one her parents had sold to start Derek's doomed business. She didn't hesitate. 2 weeks later, the papers were signed. The old Walker home belonged to Maya once again. When she arrived, the neighborhood looked smaller, almost fragile under the fading afternoon light. The house itself was worn, paint peeling, shutters crooked, the yard overgrown, but it was hers, every flaw, every scar. She stepped out of her car and walked to the porch. The same wooden boards creaked beneath her feet, but the garbage bags were gone. The space felt lighter, cleansed. She set her hand against the door, her door now, and whispered, "I'm home." She didn't plan to see them, but fate, it seemed, had other ideas. Later that week, she ran into her parents at the grocery store. Her mother froze mid-step, a carton of milk trembling in her hands. Her father looked older, worn down by years of disappointment. And Derek trailed behind them, his once confident grin replaced by quiet defeat. "Maya," her mother breathed, as if saying the name of a ghost. "You're here." "I am," Maya replied calmly, her expression unreadable. Her father swallowed hard. "We didn't know how to reach you. We made mistakes, big ones." Maya looked at them, really looked. Once she would have begged for their love. Now she only felt a bittersweet ache, not of anger but of understanding. "You did what you thought was right," she said softly, "and I did what I had to do to survive." Tears welled in her mother's eyes. "Can you ever forgive us?" Maya took a deep breath. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't something she owed. It was something she chose for herself. "I already have," she said finally, "but that doesn't mean we can go back." They nodded silently, guilt heavy in their eyes. As they turned to leave, her mother paused. "We heard someone bought the old house. Do you know who?" A faint smile touched Maya's lips. "Yeah," she said, meeting her mother's gaze. "I do." That night, Maya stood once more on the porch, the same place where her world had once fallen apart. The wind carried the scent of rain, the same as that night years ago. She closed her eyes and let the memories wash over her, not with pain, but peace. The locks were new, the lights glowed warm inside. For the first time in years, she turned the key and stepped through the door. Home, not because of who she had lost, but because of who she had become.